This conference will now be recorded.
Work session to order at 6:36 p.m. Any additions or corrections to the agenda? Anyone like to make a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor. Approve the agenda as written.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Counselor Ash. Want me to call the roll?
Sure.
Counselor Norman?
Aye.
Counselor Webb?
Aye.
Counselor Ash?
Aye.
Counselor Wagner?
Can you say that one more time, Susan?
Aye.
Sorry, I had it turned down too low. Thank you. Motion carried.
Mayor votes aye. Okay, we have a discussion tonight, Title III, Public Protection Review. Everyone have copies?
So I don't know who wants to take it, but citizen Steve Weller had requested that he basically wants staff to fully apply the code. He doesn't feel like staff was applying the code, even though the issues going up in his neighborhood were all the code by the book. We weren't going to write something that isn't in the code, and we only wrote what we could see from the right of way, because that's what the code allows. You can't have seen it from someone else's backyard and then apply code to it. So he had gone to Mayor Hobart to ask about it, and then we called this work session. So I'm not sure what else we wanted to get out of it, or if you guys want to discuss areas where you want to propose potential changes. We're not really sure from a staff perspective, other than being here to answer questions or help in any way we can.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to begin this, Josette. And plus, as a result of tonight, as a result of previous conversations that you and I had, probably a month or two ago, when I was trying to help a certain individual in the community, how do we prevent this sort of thing from getting to the point where it's just not a good situation for the city of Vernonia and the landowners and the neighbors and the whole thing. So you had mentioned, and I was talking to Eva a little bit about what we could do to help. And you had mentioned that, there's possibly certain things we could tweak in this Title III, in the Chapter 302 nuisance control, that maybe would help us prevent a situation like that from even, taking off. So, I thank you for being here tonight, Eva. I think I've read through it. Different things. There's a lot of material here.
Yep.
And
Is this something I can respond to?
absolutely.
So the way the ordinance is written, as far as how we approach situations, I think you kind of have to decide how do you want to deal with your citizens? Do you want me to show up and just automatically write a ticket? That would be a tweak in the code. Or do we want to stay on the same premise where we issue a notice of violation, they get 2 weeks. They don't comply, they get another 2 weeks. Now, by that third one, we'll issue a citation. What has happened in the past is the people that decide these things, like judges, once we write that citation, maybe weren't necessarily to the point of the code. I believe I did meet with the new judge and he reviewed our code and actually found our code to be better than counties. In that we have a mechanism to go ahead and lien properties if we need to, abate properties if we need to. But that also depends on who's just making the judgment on those citations and what they're willing to put forward as stipulations. Judge Thompson, if we came in and the city and the violator could come to some kind of agreement, then that agreement is what was held. If they said they were going to do X, Y, and Z and they didn't, then Judge Thompson would actually issue an abatement order, and that required them to do it. But it also gave us permission to enter the premise to go in and abate it ourselves. In the last year or two, that hasn't been the case. We haven't received the same amount of support that we had in years past. So I kind of feel like you might want to give the new judge, the new municipal judge, a chance to see whether or not he's going to back us the way we need to be backed to process these violations like you guys are wanting done. But we just got to make sure that when we're doing it, it's fair across the board, it's equal. It doesn't matter who relations are or any of that. I'm in a unique position in that I didn't grow up here. So that's never an issue for me. So it's not about picking, and then you need to decide, what are your priorities? For me, my priorities are going to be garbage, health and sanitation, dangerous things, and that's in Title 3-02, and it's going to be under your definitions. And this is, if you could take one of these and pass it down. The first sheet is your worksheet. This is the worksheet that I base off of. Take that whole packet and pass it down. The first sheet is the worksheet that I base it off of. So I get a complaint or I go to complaint, and it's going to meet one of these 17 criteria, and that's going to be your Title 3-02. Okay, property maintenance and setbacks, planning and stuff like that is in your Title 9, which isn't my primary section. I can operate under Title 9, but generally this is what you're going to be referring to when you refer to your nuisance code, is these violations. There's a system of checks and balances. The second page is actually a notice of violation that we send. So the initial violation when we send it out is actually a copy and paste of Title 3-02. So they have a complete copy of what those violations are. We check the box. Literally, I've copied it out of the ordinance. So it can't be said, oh, well, the ordinance says this. No, it doesn't. This is exactly what the ordinance says. And that's just kind of a backup for myself as well. And it's a safety for the citizen. That means that I can't deviate from the ordinance because I'm literally using it. On the very last page, what you're going to see is there's like a huge blank section. And in that section, what I'll do is I will actually add photos of the violation. Because when I go to court, the first thing I'm going to show the judge is that first notice of violation with the photos that were taken. And then that morning, the morning I have trial or I have a person is going to come in and plead guilty, not guilty, no contest, I'm going to go out and I'm going to take photos. And I have those in my hot hands when I go before the judge again. So I don't know that the mechanism is broken. I just think that we weren't being supported. So I'm not sure what exactly you're wanting to change.
So say, for example, someone's in the scrap business.
Sure.
They need a permit,
Business permit.
business permit issued by the city of Vernonia,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah.
So,
You want to know how it should have been at the start of that scrap business?
exactly.
We would give them the code and we would say, anything that you're collecting needs to be in containers, right? Eva can back it up. You would lay out what the expectation was ahead when they came for the business license, where I feel like there was never that mechanism in place when the person who just recently passed had their business start, right?
Yeah.
They just started doing it kind of on the side and then it kind of just ballooned and built further and further back out away from the house. But it would be detailing out what's going to get you a violation with this business should we come here and this is what it is, right?
Okay, my next question is, because he was in violation,
Mhm.
when is the point where, can the city revoke that license, or does that need to be from the higher court?
That would be a city decision. I don't,
City decision?
I don't
Yeah, I
do
think I'd have
permits.
to look at what we're referencing in their application. I could go grab one and see. I don't know what we're referencing, if it's an ORS, if it's state law, but there's going to be some reasons you can have one and reasons we can revoke. But I don't know what ours references, if it's our own code and ordinance or if it's state.
Yeah, I'm just interested.
Okay,
Curious
let's see if I can find the app within ours.
And that one had been in place decades before the city actually even started implementing the nuisance code. I don't think we actually started until I would have to check, but I would say around 2013 is when the city actually started doing, going out and doing checks and holding people accountable. I know that in older records, law enforcement did it in like the 80s and 90s, but then there's like this huge gap. There's a huge gap where it wasn't enforced. I don't know that it was a priority after 2007, especially because so many people had so many things jumbled around. So when we went through and read the ordinance, we created our model based off of that. And we got a lot in the beginning. We had a ton of corrections. You know, there's people that are going to be happy and there's people that are not going to be happy about it. And I get that. But we've cleared over 1,000 violations, you know, since 2013. And we have kept records on every one of them. So I can tell you all the way back to then on whether or not I've been to that property more than once. So I think the mechanism is there. We just needed the backup. Again. Did you find it?
No, she doesn't have any on her desk, so I'll have to get you that info of how that gets revoked. Because that could be a mechanism, some leverage.
And
Or
then
if they're not participating with code, that could be a secondary kind of consequence.
would that be the common sense thing to do? I mean, once their license was revoked, that would pretty much shut down their business. I mean,
Yeah, the tricky part with a business like that, Rick, and this is kind of where we're a small community, so we can kind of perspective take a little bit, is that say we shut it down, then he's got no money coming in.
Yeah.
So how's he getting that stuff off the property? So we're kind of
Yeah.
knowingly a cause and effect potential, right? I mean, hey, if they're not going to do it and they're going to turn their nose at every notice Eva gives and pay the ticket and say, who cares? Well, then the consequences are theirs, right? But if we know we could potentially be putting someone to never be able to get it cleaned up, that's kind of where we
yeah,
let a little bit of just knowing of, you know, what the likelihood is they'll
And the judges don't like to see that. The judge doesn't want me to come in with an individual and have $10,000 worth of fines, because code enforcement, any kind of enforcement, it's not a money-making business. Our ultimate goal is compliance. So if I come in with those $10,000 worth of tickets, more likely than not, that judge is probably going to give them 6 more months to clean it up after I've already dealt with them for 3 months.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to decide on how, you know, or what you would like to see.
Susan had asked on the chat, was the business grandfathered in because of how long they had been in business? And we don't have any businesses that are grandfathered in other than by type. So when we did the code, I believe in 99, there were some businesses that weren't in the correct zone. Those were grandfathered in to remain in that zone as long as they were under the ownership of the owner at the time. But none like this, Susan. He was allowed to have that there, but that wasn't tied to his business license, if that makes sense. Because there were a few, like things that were just when that zone map went down, there were different businesses in residential that were grandfathered in because the code was adopted at a certain point.
After they were already in
Yeah,
business.
so that would have been probably Delimas's, probably Terry's, probably yours, Donald.
Yes.
Those were businesses that were of an automotive or that kind of nature in residential. But there's nothing to say, like, that wasn't tied to their business license. That was a use of their land, if that makes sense.
Right, they just got the business
Okay.
license
The
to.
next question is there any regular or ordinances or regulations in the zoning, in residential zoning description as to what kind of businesses?
Now, from.
You know what I'm saying?
From 99 forward, we don't allow that type of business in a residential. It only was allowed because it existed when the code came down.
Before the code changed.
That's what
Oh.
I'm saying. Delimas's shop, probably Rob Curl's building was under that same, right? But then you start to get out there and then it's kind of, what are they out there? They're
So
the purple, so they're light industrial, right? Rob's Corner to Gardner's Corner is light industrial land.
Yeah,
So
Bighorn.
right,
Yes.
but that's light industrial.
they're
So
in the right zone.
That's right. So
I see.
So
Okay.
Terry's, like I was saying, Donald's was an automotive business on Elm that was grandfathered in. That land was allowed to be used for that purpose.
Okay.
Different, but now we would never let it happen in a residential area. They'd have to go to their appropriate zone.
Yeah, anyone prior to 1999 that had a business of that type in those areas is legit until it either changes owner or it's a new business after the ordinance change of 1999, then they would have to meet the new requirements.
Okay, what about the place on Bridge right up here by the fire hall? Next to Fred's house.
I
Residential.
That is a residential. That
I know
is,
Yeah, I know.
that is a business she does. But really, that type of business shouldn't, you could still do that business and it doesn't have to have the effect.
So
Does that make sense what I'm saying? She doesn't, to do that business, you don't have to leave your property in disrepair or with debris all over it.
right, I could collect cans and keep them in a bag or in
Shed.
containers and call that my side business and it's totally legal.
Yeah.
And what she's doing isn't illegal, but she has gone beyond the scope of what is allowed.
Yeah.
And that property is being addressed. We have trial on the 20th.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
So somebody having like a side hustle, as long as it isn't having a nuisance problem, if they're this is what I'll say. They can have a side hustle that doesn't invite people to their property, right? The minute you start inviting people to your property, then your side hustle is more scrutinized in a way that it isn't if I just made crochet doilies and sold them online or something, right? As a side hustle. It's when you start having customer traffic and all of those things that would bring more scrutiny. People would see it, your neighbors may complain, then we're looking into, do you have a home-based business license? Do you have this or that? But if you're a baker, you're probably not putting anything outside, right? You're not potentially, yeah.
So if you look under the nuisance, you can go to Title 3-02 or look under the potential vermin habitat. Any accumulation of material or debris on a property, including but not limited to building materials which are not properly stored or neatly piled crates, empty barrels, mattresses or bedding, old appliances or equipment or any parts thereof, furniture or other object which endanger property or public safety or constitute a fire hazard. So I think that's kind of what you're thinking of as far as that property is concerned. For the small amount of scrap business that she does, if you're facing the home to the left, there's a fence that you can't see through.
Okay.
Per our agreement, that's where that scrap is supposed to be. Okay, there's also a shed in the back where that scrap is supposed to be. Now, that was the agreement that we had after our last nuisance violation with her. Obviously, she has gone beyond the scope, and we're gonna have people that do that. Okay, I've met the requirements. They're going to leave me alone for 6 months. So I'm going to do it all over again. And then we're going to be back at the same spot.
So that's the part I'm curious about.
Mhm.
So how do we deal with them on the subsequent violation? Do we initiate the same process over again?
It depends on the length of time. If it's within a 6-month period, then we will send them one letter and then probably a ticket. Now, if it's over a year since their last violation, you have to take that into consideration. So then we would start the process like we would anew with anybody else.
And with the property where the person passed away, it was an ebb and flow. That person would get in compliance. There'd be 3 good months, then we'd see more material out front, right? Then she'd go initiate again. Hey, this isn't per the thing we agreed to, blah, blah, blah. I'm working on it, blah, blah, blah. We'd work towards compliance again, right? It's an ebb and some people are just used to using their property that way. And it's a very hard thing to train them out of, that you can't put all that stuff right up front where everyone can see it.
Right.
So is the fine schedule generated by the court, or do we have input to that?
It's in our ordinance. It's $500 per day per violation. So in that first, it is, unless there is a corresponding ORS or Oregon state statute. So let's say it's garbage, right? If there's a state statute for garbage on a premise and it's defined as $265, whereas mine is $500, then the court will take the lesser charge. So basically, if you look at this form here, any box that gets checked is considered a violation of its own. So if I check boxes 1, 2, and 3, then that's a $1,500 ticket. Now, once we get in front of the judge, it's his choice on whether or not to extend them, reduce the fine, or throw it out. It all depends on what that discussion looks like.
Do you issue warning tickets before you?
That's what
Just-
notice of violation is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually there's no
warning.
The letter is your warning.
That is,
The ticket is you're ignoring us.
and that's the third step in the process. Because we don't know, we have a lot of snowbirds in town, or we have an elderly population that could be in the hospital.
Yeah.
So we'll give them 2 weeks to respond. If they don't,
Okay.
we give them another 2 weeks. And then if they fall short after a month,
30 days. Yeah.
then we need to move forward to get that, whether it's the judge telling us we can go clean it up or we take them to court.
Well, and some of the time it's just their inability, whether it's physically to do the work. We went on Riverside, outside of the RV park, but on Riverside, there was like the loop of the 8 units. Well, the one unit at the bottom, they were an elderly couple. She was not mobile. He was the only mobile one. And the best he could do, so that they lived in a comfortable thing, was take the garbage bag and put it out the window.
It got all the way to the top of
To the window.
to the top of the house.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then we had to go in and be like, what is happening here? And so then we try to hook them up with community action team or volunteer kids that need community service to mow. Or sometimes we had Mitch on us just after work, went home, got his own mower and mowed the neighbor's, that was an elderly gentleman on not. So it's like, we're trying to get compliance out of people and not be harsh, but if people are going to ignore us, then you get the harshness.
But ultimately, that's not our goal.
But we want to the other thing that I think is important to have council understand is we've given everybody every chance they could have before we write the ticket, right? If they say, oh my gosh, I'm out of town, we'll wait for him to get back into town to talk to us. So when they come here to complain to you guys, that is someone that has had every opportunity and still decided, I'm just going to see if I can get away with it. And so one of the things that I think would help staff is and we haven't had one for a while, I think, 6 months or something back, someone came to complain about it. But if you guys would just have that in your mindset, like, okay, our staff's given them all these chances to do with the right thing and been understanding, and you're still just. But then on the flip side, like Mr. Weller's concerned, we can't we can address what we can see, we can make someone follow the code, but everybody's tastes aren't the same. Some people have yard art that's like rusty metal sculpture, right? Some people think that's horrible, right? So we're having to deal with all the versions of the citizenry and like not harass because one person, I mean, one of the funniest things, when Counselor Seeger was on council, he had a neighbor and they were just, his grass is this tall and his neighbor's grass, he would call it like 11.5 inches, right? And 12 inches is the thing, right? And we'd be like, we know it's not tall enough yet. It's not tall enough. But some people's version is like real fine and dialed in and some people's is more wild. And I've seen good looking versions of both, right? When I was doing notices on weed, I walked up to this house that I had kind of never seen before. And it was all black, which I kind of loved, right? The paint, the exterior paint. And they had the most wild flower garden entrance. And at first glance, it looks just overgrown, but then you start looking, realizing, oh, those are all different plants. And then it was a really cool look. But if you just go with one version, you might not like it.
Yeah, most of the code, I mean, if you look at the violations though, like on what we're going to write for Title III, they're pretty definitive.
Yeah.
Right. So even though I might not like something, does the code support it? And that's what we really have to look at, is whether or not the code supports it. And we really don't want to infringe on someone's civil liberties. You know, I mean, we all buy homes because that's our home and we hopefully take pride in it. But we have to be careful on what we try and mitigate on somebody, you know, on someone. Health, safety, and hazard, I think, is the best way to keep ourselves out of trouble and still be able to keep our town looking fairly nice. So,
Yeah, it's hard when there's a few eyesores right on the main drag.
believe me, I hear about them.
Yeah.
Want you guys to know I mowed
The entrance to town?
yeah.
Oh,
That was nice.
Front of the health center seniors.
oh, thank you.
Were
It was
there,
above 12 inches.
Yeah.
were there any other questions on the code or any other changes you guys would
How
like
often do you and Josette go tour around?
together?
Yeah.
Not usually. Usually I just go.
Usually she goes, or
Sometimes-
ones at lunch. We
Yeah.
go out to lunch a couple times a week, just
Oh, yeah.
buy each other lunch, just to talk, but we drive around. She'll be like, can we drive by here? Can you tell me what are we doing here? So we look at the worst case problems.
How many tickets have you written since January 1st of this year till now? Do you have any idea?
Off the top of my head, I would say 2,
Only 2?
only 2 with a fine amount of $2,000. So I don't, if that's never been, that's not a hot ticket for us as far as writing the tickets, because
Right.
generally we're going to get compliance. So if we're getting compliance, you're not going to see those stats that I feel like you're looking for.
How many notices?
How many notices since January? It was in the last staff report. It comes in your staff report every month on how many.
I didn't look at the total.
I didn't look at my totals as of today now.
100
I didn't bring it.
Over 100.
Yeah,
or?
We will average, it depends on the months. In the winter months, we're not going to tell people to go out and mow their yard. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous. So we're not going to write those ones. We'll primarily look for garbage. Garbage is a big thing in town, garbage more than anything. So we're looking for garbage. We're looking for people building things that they shouldn't be building. Those are the type of things you see in the winter. In the summer months, you're going to see a lot more of the mow your yard, pick up your stuff, vermin habitat. Well, you get a lot of vermin habitat in the winter as well. So it just depends on the month because it's cyclic depending on season. I can get you those numbers for the next staff meeting
I
if
was
you
just
like.
interested.
Yeah, I don't keep that on.
I don't really have any more questions for you, Eva, as far as the nuisance and
okay, look at this.
Part.
This was the last one you sent to him on the 7th. You can tell him from it.
So from January of this year, so in January, we started 17 nuisance violations. In February, we still had the 17 and we added one. In March, we still had the 18. In April, we had 18, we completed 4, and we wrote 8 new ones, so that was 22. So in June, we had 34. We completed 6, we wrote 16. Again, that's that
Summer.
first month of summer. In July, we had 42, we completed 7 and wrote 2 new ones. In August, we had 37. We completed 9 and wrote 4 new ones. And then the start of September, we had 32 open violations. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's there. It's working. And I think, like I said, I think with the new judge, we might see a better outcome. But if you're wanting us to, if you're going to give direction that you want every little thing written, or you want us to deviate from the code and go straight to citation, then yeah, we'll need to change the code for that. And then I'll have to talk to Sergeant Carnahan and see what that looks like.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because it goes through cycles, right? You have, everybody keeps it pretty, and then you have like, life gets on, overwhelms people, and that's the first thing to go, is what they do with their yard, what they do with their, organization.
Yeah.
They're just kind of like survival mode.
But I would just kind of like to say that if you change the code, it's really hard to change rules and regulations unless you're the person on the ground actually having to do these things and deal with these people, or the citizens, or plight, or whatever. So I would hope that if you do choose to change the code, that you take those things into consideration, because not everybody is of the same livelihood. Not everybody is of the same socioeconomics. And there are things that they are able to do, and there are things that they're not able to do. And I would hate for us as a municipality to put people in a position that they can't get out of without having the ability to work with them.
So in your opinion, this current title
Yes.
works the best for
For
not only the city, but its residents? And
if I had
And
to pick one thing to fix, it would be our senior citizens and on how we're allocating help to them. That's the worst part of our code, is when I'm dealing with someone who's 90 years old and doesn't have the means or the ability. I try and hook them up with resources, but as a city, we don't have the mechanism to affect that. So if I was going to change code, I would like to see something to affect that constituency. But as the code is written right now, I think it's working fine.
Okay.
I mean, it sounds to me like it's working really well if we've had that many notices and only 2 since in that entire period have gotten a citation.
For the most part, everyone will work with you.
Yeah.
Now, let's say, and I forgot to bring this up. So I had a situation, I have a case. So these individuals have been noticed several times. So I can go back and look at their property address and say, okay, I've talked to you in 2019. I've talked to you in 2020, 21. So what I did is I wrote the notice of violation. I wrote the timeline of contacts. I wrote the code that they're violating, and I posted it on their door, which is totally legal within code. Now, on that notice, I also stated that this will be the only warning. Okay, so that prompted them to call me. We were able to set up a repair commitment. So what a repair commitment is it's a binding contract between the city and the individual that says, yes, this is true. I did violate this ordinance. I'm giving the city the opportunity to come on and check my progress. And then we set up a timeline. So I'm like, okay, all the garbage in the front yard, when can you have that done? They said, okay, I'm going to need 2 weeks. Perfect, 2 weeks. That's the deadline, November 12th. Okay, all of the dog feces that's in the yard, when is that going to get picked up? We can get it all done in a week. Perfect, a week. And so we set that out. Now, this property it's on the residential side of the property we were talking about. Now, there's a slope in that backyard. If I ask them to go out and clean this, they're probably going to fall. It's winter. and nothing's going to get done there and after, right? None of that other stuff is going to get done. So by the end of November, there should have all of that property cleaned up with the exception of that hillside, which I pushed out until June. Now, because are they still working? Are they still showing progress? Absolutely. And we have to be able to appreciate that. But that doesn't take them off the hook. That just means on June, I'm going to come back and knock on your door. So that is also another mechanism we have to help people.
I was going to ask, how many of these are repeat offenders?
A lot of them,
I mean, it's,
majority of them are I would say repeat offenders generally for the same thing.
it's just kind of an annual cycle. Like you said, on this group here, they were every
Absolutely.
year about the same time.
For the most part.
And it sounds like you were dropping the hammer a little harder because it's like, we've been here.
Yeah.
Okay, exactly, right? So we're to
And
that
I
point.
think that's fair because
So, but then
if you've already talked to a person and they're aware that this is a violation and they do it even the second time, even within a year or 2 years, that they knew.
So every instance has to be its own instance. For the simple fact is that maybe I visited this family in January and it was garbage, and I'm back again for garbage. But you know what? They lost their job in February and they can't afford trash service. So I don't think, and I've said this before, you can't be in public service without empathy and understanding and trying to care. Because we could be jaded all day long and that you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
Right, but you're going to give them that first letter.
Right.
You don't,
But we still need to hear what
if
they're.
they ignore you at that point.
Yeah, but if you came to me and said, hey, Eva, I lost my job. I can't pay for garbage service this month. 9 times out of 10, I might even hand you $20. But the idea is that if you can get it within a week, then yeah, I'm going to give you that week that you need.
And one of the programs that we haven't had in a few years, well, since COVID, but the people, we would go the summer season and the people that had violations for trash, we would give them a voucher. We had one day where you need to rally your friends to help you get all this picked up. This is your opportunity. And we'd use one of the 30-yard dumpsters and we'd just park down here. I think Lana let us put it in there last
2
time.
of them.
Yeah. And we just parked down there and we'd take vouchers and they'd unload garbage. And it wasn't giving people like a benefit that you aren't giving everyone else. These people were never going to succeed with the benefit. They couldn't scrape together the food money or the electricity money, let alone the garbage money. So we were either going to be super punitive to them and just set them back more steps, or we were going to be like, you're in this pool with this collective group of people that we need success from, and they need an opportunity to be successful. And let's just do that.
That was similar to the abatement kind of fund that you talked about,
Right.
an extra box, helping them out. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, like I said, we're trying to help people.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's the ultimate goal, whether it's an elderly lady who can afford the dumpster, but doesn't have the physical means to pick up all that trash, so that's easy. We get high school volunteers that need credit hours and we take them up there and we clean the lady's yard. That's viable versus nothing and this lady getting sent to collections for $500 she can't afford. So I don't know.
And the garbage stays.
Right, and the garbage stays.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say is in the end, it benefits everyone because no one's looking at it. No one has a neighbor who's sick. No one has a neighbor who's stinky and has rodents, right? Everyone benefits from everyone else doing well, so.
Right. And no one's holding their garbage on the chance that code enforcement's going to have a free dumpster.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, now that I know about it.
Please, no, don't. It's on record. I said, don't do it.
Yeah.
Susan wanted to reiterate that she thought that was a wonderful program when we did it. We were
Awesome.
able to do it.
I agree.
And that's probably something we can do again.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So one more thing.
yes, sir.
Well, what's the ordinance for parking in the street overnight? for months on a time.
So that's actually an ORS. That's an Oregon state statute. And you can park in any location or any city street for up to 72 hours, and then it has to move, with the exception of Bridge Street,
First Avenue.
and Rose Avenue. You can't park, you're not supposed to park trailers or semi trucks there for really any extended length of time because it's a state highway. Now, are you talking about First Avenue in
Yep.
particular?
I
So,
barely get my school bus through there every day.
so this is, okay, so you want to talk about reoccurring offenses. So the other day I went up there and I put tags on any trailer that was up there on the street because I think it's 9-08. You cannot have a utility trailer, a boat, any of those things parked on a city street. So we went up from,
Unless it's for loading and unloading.
for emergency repair. So from Rose Avenue all the way up, I went up and tagged all of those trailers. Now, they move them, and if they move them back, then the time starts over. That's how the ORS is. It's like if you parked in front of your house and never moved your car, and then you got an orange tow tag on it, it says move it in 72 hours, you literally only have to move it so far before you're technically in compliance. So that's not that the issue isn't being worked.
When that group came to us and they were like, take your parking out of your building code. Remember, they wanted us to eliminate parking for ADUs and eliminate the needs for driveways to get more houses on a lot and all that. Do you remember that presentation?
Yep.
Well, part of the problem is we should have driven them up to First Street where everybody has 4 rigs and 2 people, right? I mean, there's like couples and massive amounts of.
The one house has 8.
Yeah, and we can't control it.
And it's a little mill house.
Yeah.
I know which house it is.
But
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between parking within the bounds of the right of way and parking in a travel lane.
But the bounds of the right of way aren't fully built out. They don't.
Yeah, but that's not our fault.
It isn't, but then we would need to post like no parking, right?
Which they do in the city. You'll have like no parking this side of the street. Missouri Avenue is a perfect example.
Yeah.
So on the
It's only
church
one
side, there's a sign that says no.
Because the right of way isn't the full width. So that's one option. Or the
Because
other.
I can't understand how one person can park in the travel lane on this side and then how come the other guy on the other side, well, I'm just going to park there too. And we'll just plug the road. I mean, you're basically plugging the road. You're in a travel lane.
One of the options we had talked about for that street was going and marking the right of way. Because they have no concept that 8 feet of their grass is the road.
Right.
And if they knew that, maybe they would turn that into gravel and park at the edge of the actual right of way. Because we talked about how do we let these people know? And we know there's even some with structure in the right of way, which should it fail, it has to be removed.
Yeah.
You've noticed all the people that have those things that are in the right of way. Should they fail and we come to you, you got to move it to the edge. But yeah, that one's a hard one. It's those small roads where we've only paved like a 12 or 15 foot strip. They don't get that really means 3 feet on each side of that needs to be available. Because
So with those same vehicles, when I'm going around doing code, I'm also looking for expired tags. That's usually your first indicator, broken windows, things like that. If there's a vehicle that I can see ORS, Oregon State statute, then a lot of times I'll snap a picture and I'll just send officers on duty. Say, hey, can you guys go tag this and take a look at it? If the vehicle is parked on the street and it's fully operable and it has good registration and tags, there's not a ton we can do unless we change the standard of the parking on the street. Because I can't go to one guy and say, you can't do this and allow this person to do it. So if you wanted to block half that street for on-street parking and do whatever it is you guys do to get that done, then that's an enforceable act. But there's nothing on that street that says no parking on the street or along the street. So that's where we need the tool.
I just figured
To
it
make
was an
that happen.
ORS that you could
Well,
park in a travel lane.
But they
Used to
don't
be.
see it as a travel lane because the road isn't fully built out.
No.
Does that make sense? So that's why I'm saying maybe we have the surveyor just run stakes down both sides and we give them all a letter that says, your front yard has been marked with the edge of the right of way. We will no longer be allowing anyone to park on the asphalted or finished surface. Should you be found there with a vehicle, your vehicle will be ticketed for parking in a travel lane, or some education component with the, hey, this is reality.
And I agree, it's going to take an educational
Yeah.
component up front to be fair to everybody because everybody's so used to just doing it.
Well, and literally that's a culture
It is.
that Vernonia has, that if you want to change.
Never used to be.
Ever since
Back
I've
in the
been.
day, I would have wrote a ticket.
Well,
Never used to be like that.
but it is now, and it's on multiple.
I used to read electric meters all up and down that hill and walked all those roads. And never anybody parked in the road.
I literally have a wall up there that's built inside the street.
Yeah, I know
And
which one it
and
is.
it was built, and so
For
once
parking.
it's built and it's been there for years, how are we supposed to go back retroactively to an issue somebody else caused?
Right.
That's really hard.
Yeah.
So that same individual was given a letter, and and it's in their property record that this street is actually this width. If the city ever chooses to improve the road to that width, then that's at your cost. That wall coming out is at your cost. It's not the city's.
Yeah.
And that's, so, I mean, parking and walls.
And
There's
most of those letters are up in that street.
Majority of
There's
those
one on
letters.
Bridge that has a fence in
Oh,
the
I don't know
way.
how many times I've got out and actually removed barrier signs and speed bumps right in the middle of the street, slow down children playing, and
Yeah, and that specific individual has been talked to by law enforcement. They've been given notice by me. So it's not that they're not working in the situation. I don't want you to think that your concern is falling on deaf ears, because it's not.
okay,
But we still have to react to those situations within our rights as a community or as a municipality.
Yeah.
It can't be just because I want that car moved, I'm going to go tell them to move it. That's not right in any sense.
Yeah, we got to get them.
I get it, and I just hope there's never an instance where, there's a medical emergency and there's a fire truck and they can't get through and somebody passes away.
I absolutely agree. And if we get the right mechanism to make that change, then we won't have to worry about that issue. But currently, we just don't have that mechanism in place.
Short of doing like educational thing where we're like, hey, heads up, we're going to start writing this ticket.
Well, and
But then.
I had a
then do you
discussion
do
with
that?
Sean about these same issues.
Yeah,
It's like, probably really need to have a campaign in the paper and telling people, okay, I know things got a little lax, but we're fully staffed and
right.
we're gonna start reining it in.
It's just, hey, and make yourself comfortable with Vernonia map and see how wide is your street. Drop the aerial, see how much of your, like, my yard, even on Lakeview, which is way wider
Yeah.
of paved space, like 8 feet of my front yard is the right of way. It probably will never be built that big,
Right.
but I can't put anything in it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
short of bushes or something I can mow.
Right.
But maybe it's just educating them on what's the width of your street.
And a lot of people,
them are 60
a lot of
feet.
people don't know that either.
Oh, no.
And a lot of new homeowners are coming in and putting things technically that's out in the right of way and being told, no, you can't do that. Well, that's my house. Well, due diligence, you should have checked nobody likes to hear that either.
They really don't
You should have
like-
really tried to check before you bought it.
You buy a house and you got 3 parking spots, but then you buy 8 rigs.
It's pretty common.
It's like, excuse me, not the city's, we're not in the parking business, folks.
Well, it's not all your neighbors' issues either.
Oh, yeah.
Neighbor have parking in front of their house.
Well, I had a car over there that kept parking in the driveway at my vacant house. And then when Sean came to tell him they couldn't park there because it's private property, He goes, but there's nowhere else to park. That doesn't mean you can just park in someone's driveway.
You wanted someone else to be accountable for his actions.
Yeah.
There's
There's
a
nowhere else to park.
red pickup with a high left jack on the front of it that's been there for 2 nights,
Yeah.
right next to your house.
Yeah. And I usually don't care, but I'm like, in the driveway is kind of ballsy.
Because if you,
They park up out front all the
Right, if
time.
it's a public
And-
street, okay, I don't
Yeah.
like it.
And I
You have
rarely,
the right to park
we
there.
don't even remember to go over there, frankly enough.
So the due
I
diligence,
got a notice because we forgot to mow the lawn.
we
Out
had
of sight,
that
out of
problem
mind.
at the end,
Right. I remember talking with you guys about it.
and they wanted us to sell them 2 feet more property because the stairway is on our property.
I
Oh,
remember that whole thing. Yeah.
And after I got thinking about it, the stakes were in there when they bought the place.
yeah.
So it's not like we went and had it surveyed after they bought the place. It was surveyed before they bought the place.
Yeah. So do they not use that side of the stairs now or?
They still go up and down those.
Oh,
I thought you guys were going to cut them down.
Well, I put my fence inside the post for the stairs
Oh,
because I figured if I cut them down, then we'd be in trouble.
yeah.
You know,
You're just making claim that this is still our property.
Yeah.
Whether your stairs are here or not.
solved a lot of problems by putting the fence up because they would come out of the inn, lean against our rig, smoke their cigarettes and leave their butts on our property. And
Yeah.
so the fence has helped a lot.
Yeah.
Even though it was just a green chicken wire fence, it made a big difference.
That's good.
And every now and then we get a bunch of cigarette butts where they throw them off the deck, but I just throw them back over in the yard.
Have it back.
Well, go ahead, Dale.
so I know, and Josette and I discussed this before, and the only other thing you always wonder about as a counselor, are there other cities that have something that they're using that works better?
I did.
Do you have contacts?
Yeah.
I mean, like Stephanie, I know the recorders, they talk, and I mean, I'm always open if there's another city that's like, well, this has really worked for us, how we're doing it.
Mhm.
I mean, like you say, compliance is the main goal.
So if what I have done, I actually went and did ride-alongs with Hillsborough Code Enforcement. I'm also a part of the Oregon Code Enforcement Association, which actually originated out of Hillsborough, and now it's all of Oregon. So yeah, we bounce codes off each other. Or if someone is looking for, like there was a RV habitation, someone was looking for code on that, so we sent them ours. So we do look at other people's codes, but it also depends on when you're reading this code. And it would behoove all of you to go to any city, and you can go to their city web pages and look up their ordinances. But you want to make sure that you're looking up ordinances that are relevant to your location. So like if I'm going to look up ordinance for Vernonia, I'd probably look up Yamhill. Yamhill's a smaller town like ours. It's roughly the same demographics. I definitely wouldn't go off a place like Bend, where Bend, the demographics are way different. They're actually extremely stringent. They have a lot of like Airbnbs or vacation.
HOAs.
So like the trash can's in the wrong place and you're going to get a fine there, which obviously is not something that would work for us here. So yeah, we look at code all the time. If we find code that looks like it would be beneficial to us, yes, absolutely. I would bring it to Josette, and I have brought code to her before. There's one that I like that would not go over, and that is that you can't park on a surface that's not impervious. So, or they would have to be gravel or concrete. That would be awesome from a code perspective. Man, look at how all these cars in town would be gone. Would that work here? No. And would we want to take that away from citizens, or however they're getting to work or making a living? No, we wouldn't. So definitely look at different codes, but it also needs to be relevant to where you're trying to implement them. Nobody wants Vernonia to be Portland. We just want, garbage gone, stuff like that, maintain your buildings. I mean, essentially that's what this code is. is just make it healthy and safe and generally look nice. I don't think it's too egregious.
So in the past, I know there's been frustration because we go through all our steps and I've heard that once it goes to the judge, then they turn around and do the same thing.
The
Sometimes.
past judge, yeah.
So we've had,
And so how do we, as a city, work with the new judge to impress upon them that,
That's what she did. She met with them and went over the
Yeah.
code.
Okay,
Like,
but I
this is
mean-
what we're doing ahead of you, so you don't need to give them more time to comply. They're not going to.
yeah, I mean, if you got somebody just ignoring us,
Yeah.
we've went all through all the loops.
no, I sat down with the new presiding judge here and we went through the entire ordinance. He asked questions, I asked questions on what exactly are we able to do. There was a conversation on how we can lien a house based off his fines. And I said, well, that's easy. It's built right here into the code because it's technically a civil matter, not necessarily a criminal matter. So he has to he has to adjudicate it through civil law, not criminal law. And so by having that conversation, that kind of opened him up to looking at it from a different perspective, which I think will work more in our favor than against us. Whereas previously, we've had Judge Thompson, who was a huge supporter of what we did. We've had other judges that choose to mediate. So let's have a conversation, even though I've talked till I'm blue in the face, to try and get, and it tends to not end up anywhere. I just don't think I really don't feel like we're going to have that same type of situation this time around. And Mr. Judge Gibson is actually very approachable. So if any of you wanted to talk to him, I'm sure you probably could on Tuesdays or Thursdays. I know he is reviewing our code and our first trial with him is coming up on the 21st. So that'll be a good indicator of where we're going to be on that. Any other questions?
Yeah, and that was kind of, I was wanting to know is if somehow as the city or council, if you need some backup with the judge of trying to persuade them to,
Yeah.
this is really an issue for us and we'd
I'm
really
hoping-
like to get something that works good for everybody here.
I'm hoping
But it
that
needs to
this
work,
won't. I would definitely say, maybe you guys pop in on him and chat with him. He's a good person. And he seems to be very open-minded and fairly real in his conversation. There's not a lot of political jargon. So I can appreciate that. It's pretty black and white. So, but yeah, I got a warm fuzzy feeling after our conversation.
Good.
Not that he's always going to vote in my favor, but I have a fighting chance now.
Right.
For any questions?
I've noticed, being a part of this community for a long time, that incidents or non-compliances are only temporary. They don't last. Sometimes they don't last very long at all. There might be a couple of years of this stuff going on, but it always fizzles out. You know what I mean? There's no substance. So
Well, the world is changing.
this was a great workshop. And it's the first time I wish I would have sat down with you a long time ago because, I think that if everyone gets on the same page and understands what you do,
If you guys want to go drive around, I'm more than willing to.
yeah. It's,
I have no issues.
What about that?
and
And I'll be like, it's on that list, Dale.
Look at the list, Dale. It's already a counter report.
Tell me where that's at.
you have anything to add, Donald?
Well, I think with what Eva said about the judge, that might help us a lot. And it kind of falls into, if we don't have a jail to take the people to that we arrest, why do you arrest them?
Mine aren't arrestable offenses.
Right, but I mean,
Yeah.
if you don't have backing on the other side, why waste your time?
Yeah.
And it sounds like hopefully this time we have a judge that will be on our side and things will go for us and help us rather than keep making it stagnant or dragging it on.
Well, like I said, I sat and read through it with him and highlighted the sections that were like, you're doing municipal, and it clicked. I feel like it clicked. Whereas the other ones didn't want to hear it. I really do feel like he's gonna give us the benefit of the doubt in here. As long as I do my job and present my case well, then hopefully it goes in our favor.
And that bad place across from Knott Street is going away, and it's getting cleaned up, and it's.
Congratulations.
Well,
I don't know.
hard way of doing it.
For years, the joke was he was going to leave that to me as a joke. So I'm glad that somebody's taking care of it.
He left it to his daughter.
Thank God.
Susan, did you have any questions?
I have specific questions about the code, but I think that I will make an appointment to meet with Eva to clarify them before I bring them out publicly. Because
Okay.
I know she's really smart. I mean, she's on everything, and I'm sure she's been addressing them. So it's just clarification of code.
Okay.
Okay, anytime.
Okay. Well, thank you again
Thank you.
for being here and sharing with us. So I'll adjourn this workshop at 7:38 PM. Meeting adjourned.
Perfect.